Jews, Christians, and Muslims, while they disagree on many things, all agree that on the Day of Judgment, every person who has ever lived will be physically resurrected. Just which scientific laws does this violate? One's tempted to say all of them. If the basic claims of religion are true, science is so blind to this underlying reality.
We have literature, we have our duties to each other. What leads to despair is to live the only life one has, being told what to do by despots and crackpots and pseudoscientists who claim the right to order us around in the name of God. Humanity has to outgrow and transcend that oldest of all the tyrannies. Thank you very much.
Do you see how tall I am and how tall Daniel Dennett is? I mean, does this look like this is a fair match? My friends, a man is on his deathbed, and his priest says to him, before you die in your last moments, renounce Satan and condemn his evil. And the man is silent. And the priest says again, these are your last moments of life, renounce Satan and condemn his evil. And still the man is silent. And the priest says, why will you not finally renounce Satan? And the man lifts his head up to his full stature. He looks at the priest and he says, Father, until I know where I'm going, I'm not antagonizing anybody. What's it been like for all of you who raised your hands to say that you're on the side of religion? To hear speaker after speaker, scientist after scientist, tell you that you are nothing but a superstitious, backward, knuckle-dragging Neanderthal. Don't you know that science has replaced religion? In fact, in the one slide I'm going to use, miracles of modern technology. Okay, now you see the evolution of man? That guy over there at the very end, that's the evolutionary scientist. If you count a few back, you get the man who believes that the Apollo landing was in a television studio. Just behind him is the man who believes that the earth is flat. And all the way on the bottom, the guy like this, he believes that Elvis is still alive. And just behind him is the guy who believes in God. We're too mature to play games. Religion involves not much more faith than science. First of all, if we want to believe in God because we're afraid of death, would we really have invented a God who judges us after death? Is that comforting? On the contrary, if you were someone who ran a crematory at Auschwitz, what would you prefer to believe? That there's a God who's going to catch up to you and enact justice? Or that you can escape in the silence of the grave? In fact, Aldous Huxley said that atheism itself has intellectual reasons for the dismissal of God. Aldous Huxley was from the most famous of all evolutionary families. He said, I had reasons for the world not to have meaning. The philosophy of meaningless was an instrument of my liberation from morality because it interfered with my sexual freedom. Which is very nice. First of all, that there's a scientist who can be very forthright and candid. And secondly, it's nice to know there's still a guy in England having sex. Now, my friends, let's first begin with the faith inherent in science. Science says that a series of genetic mistakes, genetic mutations, led to the great complexity of our world. How complex? Well, if the Earth wasn't tilted 23 degrees on its axis, giant mountains of ice would be caused by the water vapor from the oceans. It would decimate life on Earth. If the Earth did not rotate 1,000 miles an hour on its own axis, if it were slower, it would freeze seedlings at night. It would scorch plants during the day. If the moon were any closer to our planet, then the tides would bring the oceans and make life on Earth impossible. The problem, however, is that genetic mutation, according to the scientists themselves, is A, so rare, about 1 in 1,000 is a DNA mutation, and second, they're never beneficial. These are mistakes. A.J. Miller is the man who devoted more study than any other individual to mutations. He says, the great majority of all mutations, certainly well over 99%, are harmful. as to be expected of the effect of an accidental occurrence. Muller goes on to say, and he won a Nobel Prize, good mutations are so rare that we can consider them all bad. Now, how many mutations would it take, for example, to create a horse? Well, for that we go to Julian Huxley, one of the world's most famous evolutionists. He says, a proportion of favorable mutations of 1 in 1,000 does not sound like much, but it's probably an understatement. With this proportion, get ready for this, we should have to breed 1,000,000 strains, 1,000 squared, to get one containing 2 favorable mutations, and so on up to 1,000 to the millionth power, if you can even understand numbers these big, to get something containing 1,000,000. 1,000 to the millionth power is one with 3 million zeros after it. It would take 3 books of 500 pages just to write it. Now, why would anyone believe in this? The answer is simple. Science says given enough time, anything can happen. But if you speak about an infinity of time, how different is that to an infinite God? This becomes semantics. The two become almost too similar to distinguish. And I'm not saying evolution didn't happen. It could very well be that evolution is true. In fact, as someone who believes in the Bible also speaks about the progression from the mineral to the vegetable to the animal to the intellectual, an evolutionary progression. I'm simply saying the numbers this big, and Sam Harris is speaking right after me, address this. You're talking about numbers, you can have all the time in the world, and something that has 300,000 zeros after it, how could it possibly take place without some sort of guiding hand? My friends, religion isn't really only about how the world is created, and that's just a sideshow. The chapters in Genesis that deal with the creation of the world are only 2 or 3. What religion really is the most radical statement in the history of the world, which is that every single one of you possesses the power to choose the kind of person you want to be. There is a God who gave us moral commandments, and that without God, then the laws of do not kill, do not steal, do not commit adultery are nothing but euphemisms for personal taste. Because if there isn't a God, who is the ultimate arbiter and the standard by which these laws have definition, then all we have are 2 different people who are disagreeing. I want Sam Harris to please address. A child is born and he has severe Down syndrome. He will never be anything but a burden to his parents. He has a financial strain. Special needs children often even ruin the marriages of their parents. Why should we not euthanize that child? We get so upset that Hitler euthanized the infirm. But doesn't that sort of make sense? In fact, Francis Crick, who won a Nobel Prize for the DNA molecule, mapping the DNA molecule, said that we should really define birth as 2 days after parturition so that a baby could be examined for defects. And if those defects were sufficiently deleterious, we could declare the child to not yet have been born. The only reason we keep that child alive, even though we all live in societies of limited resources, is because life is sacred, not because of the quality of life, but the sanctity of life. There is no rational reason. Somewhere right now, there is a police officer in the north of Mexico, and he barely earns enough money to support his family. And a drug dealer wants to give him a few extra bucks to look the other way while they smuggle cocaine into the United States. And no one's ever going to find out, and no one's ever going to see, and no one's ever going to know. Tell me one reason that police officer should not take the money when he needs it for his family. Give me one moral reason other than the idea that there is justice in the world and that we have the power to choose our moral character. Everything we've heard in this conference is that people almost have no choice. Science seems to be going against choice. Biological determinism, genetic predisposition. Freud said we're far less masters of our own mental household than we otherwise suppose, and out of control id and ego. But religion says that at every moment you have the power to choose. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Christian apologetics collapses when tested against evidence. Evolution is not blind magic. It is mutation filtered by selection. Antibiotic resistance proves life changes under pressure, and the long-term E. coli experiment showed bacteria gaining new abilities over generations. The Bible also fails as a moral guide. Exodus 21 treats slaves as property, and 1 Samuel 15 commands killing children. Morality does not come from ancient threats. It comes from reducing harm, protecting life, and using reason.
Well, it's a great honor to be here. It seems to have fallen to me and my colleagues, Christopher and Dan, to argue against God in what I am now told is the most religious state in your nation. I'm encouraged by the show of hands here. I just want to assure those of you who are religious here that our purpose is not to offend you this morning, but I will nevertheless repay your hospitality by telling you exactly what I think about religion. Now, as someone who has spent the last few years criticizing religious faith, I've become quite familiar with how people of faith rise to the defense of God. As it turns out, there are not 100 ways of doing this. There appear to be just 3. Either you argue that a specific religion is true, or you argue that religion is useful, or you attack atheism as intolerant, elitist, or otherwise corrosive of basic human values. Now, the only line of argument that is relevant to this debate, or indeed any debate about the validity of religion, is an argument that religion is true. Or rather, that one religion is true, because of course they can't all be true. In fact, our opponents here stand for 2 distinct and mutually incompatible faiths. Was Jesus Christ the Messiah? The Rabbi and Dinesh are not likely to agree on that point. As Bertrand Russell pointed out over 100 years ago, even if we knew one of the earth's religions was true, perfectly true, given the multiplicity of faiths, given their mutual incompatibility, all believers should expect damnation purely as a matter of probability. But before I go deeper into this issue of religion's truth, I just want to illustrate how confused a person must be to argue that it is reasonable to believe in God because religion is useful, because it gives life meaning, because it makes people more moral than they otherwise would be, as the rabbi suggested, because it makes people happy, any of the benefits you could imagine of religion. Okay, imagine you're walking down the street and you run into an old friend, and he looks radiantly happy. You ask him what's going on in his life, and he tells you that everything changed for him the day he realized that he was destined to marry Angelina Jolie. It might occur to you to ask, why does he believe this? I mean, Angelina Jolie is, after all, one of the most beautiful and famous people on the planet. She's not incidentally married to Brad Pitt. They have something like 27 children at this point. Okay, what if your friend, sensing your skepticism, said, "You clearly don't understand. This belief gives my life meaning. Okay, I now know my purpose in life. It's to be Angelina's husband." What if your friend said that this belief has made me a better person? I'm now incredibly kind to children, anticipating having to raise Angelinas once Brad leaves. Or what if your friend said to you, "You can believe whatever you want, but I wouldn't want to live in a universe where I don't marry Angelina Jolie." Okay, it should be quite clear at this point that your friend has lost his mind. Okay, and it's probably a dangerous person, and yet this is precisely the kind of talk that so often passes for wisdom in religious circles and may attempt to pass for wisdom here. Certainly the morality argument is of that sort. Beliefs are not like clothing. Okay? Comfort and utility and attractiveness cannot be our conscious criteria for adopting them. To believe a proposition, you have to believe that you have good reasons for believing it. And the effect that this belief will have on your life cannot be among those reasons. And this is what it is to be clouded by bias. This is why we have phrases like wishful thinking and self-deception. To really believe that there is a God is also to believe that you stand in some relation to his existence such that if he didn't exist, you wouldn't believe in him. How does the supposed usefulness of religion fit into this scheme? It doesn't. So let's return to this question of truth. It's very common for people to say there's no conflict between religion and science because they relate to different subject matters. Okay, this is a lie. Religion and science both make claims about the way the world is. They make incompatible claims about the same reality, and they make these claims based on very different standards of evidence and modes of argument. It should be quite clear that there's a conflict, a perfect conflict, between demanding good evidence for what you believe and being satisfied with bad evidence or no evidence. So religion and science are in conflict because there's no way to disentangle religious and scientific truth claims. The claim that Jesus was born of a virgin, say, it's a central claim to Christianity. It is also a claim about biology. The claim that he rose from the dead and will return to earth is a claim about history. It's a claim about the human survival of death. It's a claim apparently about human flight without the aid of technology. Jews, Christians, and Muslims, while they disagree on many things, all agree that on the day of judgment, every person who has ever lived will be physically resurrected. Just which scientific laws does this violate? One's tempted to say all of them. If the basic claims of religion are true, science is so blind to this underlying reality, and the laws of nature are so susceptible to supernatural modification as to render the whole enterprise of science ridiculous. If, on the other hand, the basic claims of religion are false, most of the people on this planet are profoundly confused about the nature of reality and beset by quite irrational hopes and fears. And many people are simply wasting their lives and spreading delusion, often with tragic results. It seems to me no thinking person can be indifferent between the two sides of this dichotomy. Now, it's often imagined that non-believers like myself must be in principle closed to spiritual life. This is not true. You can have a deep spiritual and ethical life without lying to yourself or to your children about the nature of reality, without pretending to know things you do not know. There's nothing that prevents a non-believer from experiencing ecstasy and self-transcending love and rapture and awe. In fact, there's nothing that prevents a non-believer from going into a cave and practicing meditation for a year like a proper mystic. What non-believers don't tend to do is make unjustified and unjustifiable claims about the nature of the cosmos and about the divine origin of certain books on the basis of those experiences. That is a difference worth noticing. So I want to suggest to you that whatever is true about our circumstance, ethically and spiritually, can be discovered now and can be talked about in language compatible with our growing scientific understanding of the world and of the human mind. Whatever discoveries are there to be made about how to maximize human well-being can be talked about in language that is not an outright affront to all that we've come to know in the last 2,000 years. And to subscribe to one of the Iron Age religions, like Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, is to make the tacit claim that that is impossible, that there is, in fact, no way to understand our circumstance using the tools of our modern understanding of the world, that some measure of superstition is necessary, some measure of mythology, that we have to lie just this much. The point is, we can place our confidence only in human conversation. And the question is, do you want to place it in a 21st century conversation where we have all of the world's literature and learning available to us? Or do you want to place it in a first century conversation? Or a 7th century conversation, as preserved in one of our holy books? Thank you very much.
The religion side wants a courtroom exemption. Prayer was tested in a large heart surgery study, and it failed to improve recovery. The Bible claims dead saints walked into Jerusalem in Matthew 27:52-53, a public miracle that would need serious evidence, not one passing paragraph. Neuroscience also shows spiritual experiences are tied to brain activity during prayer and meditation. The brutal conclusion is simple. Christianity has stories, emotions, traditions, and threats. It does not have reliable proof.
I want to rise to Sam Harris's challenge, which is the idea of trying to address issues of religion, God, immortality but in a 21st century way. I want to examine the compatibility or incompatibility between science and religion. But for me, these are not purely abstract or theoretical questions. A few years ago, my dad died. About a year ago, my best friend got cancer. And he's a very successful entrepreneur. And he said to me, Dinesh, the apparent normalcy of our everyday life is a sham. We basically live every day as if we are never going to die tomorrow. And he says, suddenly I wake up and discover I am going to die tomorrow. He says, all my past achievements, all my current projects, all my future plans are instantly jeopardized by this great wrecking ball, death. Now, I have just published a book about life after death. It's called Life After Death, The Evidence. Why the evidence? Because I've believed in life after death since I was a child, but I believed it in a childish way. I believed it on the basis exclusively of faith. Now, as I get older, I have a lot of questions about it, and that faith has to be scrutinized in the light of evidence. Here's the problem. The atheist is posing as the champion of reason and science and evidence. I want to begin by showing that on an issue crucial to religion, is there life after death? The atheist is not only as ignorant, but more ignorant than the religious believer. Here's why. If you said to a religious believer in this room, do you know if there's life after death? Do you believe that there's life after death? The religious guy would say, yeah. How do you know? Well, I know because it says so in the book of Daniel, or it says so in the book of Revelation. I know based on the Bible. In effect, God told me. Now, the atheist will be chuckling and laughing at this point and saying, that's preposterous. The religious believer doesn't know. No one has been to the other side of the curtain. No one has interviewed dead people. So the believer is claiming knowledge that the believer cannot possibly have. And this is, in a sense, true. But what if we were to turn the camera around and say to Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, or Daniel Dennett, do you believe there is life after death? They will say no. And you say, well, this is very interesting. You haven't been to the other side of the curtain either. You haven't interviewed any dead guys. What information do you have that the religious believer doesn't have? And the answer is none. And so the atheist and the believer are in exactly the same position. Both are making a truth claim, and both are totally ignorant. Both are stating a belief on a position on which neither one has any evidence at all. Now, I should say, a Christian. Sam Harris said earlier that there's a lot of incompatibility on our side of the aisle. This is not true. Christianity happens to be the only religion in the world that holds another religion, Judaism, to be absolutely and completely true. That's why in Christianity the New Testament is put on top of the Old Testament, and both are Holy Scripture. But I want to look at the issue of life after death in the time I have in a scientific way. And the argument I want to make is that this idea, preposterous though it seems, is in fact supported by the best empirical and scientific evidence we have now. I want to begin by talking for a moment about physics. Because as a Christian, if you were to ask me, do you believe there's life after death? I would say, on faith, I believe yes. And you say, well, where's it going to take place? And I say, well, it'll take place in heaven. You say, well, where's heaven? Is it up in the sky above the clouds? I would say, no, Christians, like Jews, believe that heaven is another realm. It's a place that's eternal. God is eternal. What does eternal mean? Outside of space and time. And then you say, well, don't you believe that when you live on after death, your soul will be united to a body? And I would say, yeah, Christians believe that your soul will be reunited to a resurrected body, but it's going to be different than any body we have now. It's going to be a material body, but in some senses it will be incorruptible. It will last forever. Now, 200 years ago, if you said this, it would make absolutely no scientific sense. Because we lived in a Newtonian universe, And if you raise the question of a realm outside the universe, there was no outside. Space and time are presumed to extend infinitely in all directions. If somebody were to say to you, space stops at that wall, you would say, ridiculous. There's what's on the other side of the wall, more space. Today, however, if you send your son or daughter to a local university, an introductory course in physics, they will learn right away that not only did the universe have a beginning, the Big Bang, but space and time also had a beginning. Another way to put this is that space and time are properties of our universe. Beyond our universe, no space, no time, or different laws of space and time. Today, scientists will speak about hidden dimensions, other realms, multiple universes. What do we know about multiple universes? Not a whole lot, but one thing we do know: the laws that they operate under, if there are any laws, are not the same as the laws of our universe. Moreover, today, scientists say that matter, in the Newtonian universe, they would say resurrected bodies that live forever. This is crazy. We know what matter is. It has defined and fixed qualities. But today, scientists will speak about dark matter and dark energy. And what do we know about dark matter? That it has attributes or qualities different from any matter that we have encountered or is detectable by any scientific instrument. And if you add up all the dark matter and dark energy in the universe, what percentage of total matter and energy does it amount to? 95%. And so when the atheist, but pulling himself into false superiority, says, well, this idea of bodies, material bodies that last forever is ridiculous, the answer is, sorry, pal. Why is it ridiculous? It's ridiculous because we know what matter is. But how can you know what matter is when you only have 5%? My point is that we should be a little modest in the arrogance of our atheism. Why? Because modern science itself has opened up possibilities. It has shown us wider horizons than we knew before. Now, the issue of life after death ultimately is an issue on which certain knowledge is not possible. Why? Because, as Shakespeare said, death is the undiscovered country. We don't know. And therefore, it might seem that the intelligent position when you don't know is agnosticism. I'm going to suspend judgment until the facts come in. I want to suggest that this is actually the dumbest position of all. And here's why. Imagine if you are dating a woman and trying to consider the question of, should you ask her to marry you? Now, the fact is, you can use all the reasonable knowledge at your disposal, but if you say, what is life with this woman going to be like for the next 50 years, you can never know. So you say, okay, since I cannot know, I'll be an agnostic. I'll wait for the data to come in. But the data will never be in. If you keep waiting, she will marry someone else or you will both be dead. So the point is that agnosticism is, from a practical point of view, a foolish position. We are all in the position of jurors. We're facing a question, and as Kierkegaard said, life has to be lived forward. We have to make a decision. We have to act. If we believe in life after death, it's a decision that is not only supported by truth, but good for us. Thank you very much.
The afterlife claim survives by hiding inside gaps. Cosmology's unknowns do not become heaven. NASA gives the universe as about 5% ordinary matter, 27% dark matter, and 68% dark energy. None of that is evidence for souls, resurrection, or eternal bodies. Brain science points the other way. Damage to the brain can damage consciousness, memory, behavior, and personality. Even the Bible is not consistent. Ecclesiastes says the dead know nothing, while later texts imagine judgment. Religion sells mystery as proof. Science demands evidence.
Thanks for coming. You might not think it to look at me, but my background is a British family of the Royal Navy. And the examination for captaincy in the Navy used to be a very demanding one. You can read it in the novels of Forrester, and maybe some of you have read Jack Aubrey, getting the nautical commission. Came a day when a young man was sitting for his exam, and he was asked what he would do if a great wind got up and was blowing him towards the rocks. And he said he would tack to starboard and pile on extra sail. They said the admirals, what if the wind continues to blow you towards the rocks? And they're on the port side. He said, I continue to tack to starboard and I'd add another mainsail, or stud sail. And they asked him the question again, and he gave the same answer. And finally, one of the admirals said, where are you getting all this sail from? And the young captain-to-be said, the same place you're getting all that wind from. The relevance of my story, which you must already be asking yourself about, is this. What matters is not what you think, but how you think. And all the discoveries that have been made and all the enlightenment that's come to us is from the scientific and the philosophical method, not that of a priori assumptions of faith or the belief that wisdom comes from revelation. So now we know what the church used to tell us wasn't possible, which is that we are a primate species produced by evolution on an earth where 99.9% of all species hitherto, I won't say created, that have hitherto appeared, have already become extinct. And now a good number of religious people will now accept that, but it took them a while. And you can see the process by which they try and explain things away and then try and take credit for them. At first it was argued that God had put the fossil bones in the rock so people's faith could be tested. Nice try. Didn't last long. Then the various attempts, which still go on, to try and ban the good news of evolution. And then now many Christians, and some Christian authorities, and some Jewish ones too, say, no, of course it did all happen, and it's amazing to look at the evidence and the extraordinary scope and variety and even beauty of it. In fact, come to think of it, it proves that God must have been even cleverer than we thought. Now, you'll notice that there's something completely useless about this argument. It doesn't teach you anything, and it cannot be falsified. And an argument that supposedly explains everything invariably explains nothing at all. The physicist who discovered the Big Bang, I'm moving from evolution now, was actually a Catholic priest in holy orders and a professor at the University of Louvain. And after his quarrel with Einstein about general relativity and his hypothesis of the Big Bang, he went to the Pope and he said, look, this is how I think everything began. In fact, I think it's a sure thing. And it's very important. And the Pope said, well, if you're right, I can have it taught as dogma in the schools, if you like, so everybody has to believe it. Now, you see again the difference of method and approach. That wouldn't have been a gain for the theory of relativity or for the study of physics, to have it preached as revealed truth. We still don't know a great deal about what happened in the first instance of our cosmos. We still don't know quite how the quantum works. We know it does, we don't quite know why. And therefore, I'm going to argue in the time I have that the late, great Stephen Jay Gould, a non-believer, was wrong when he said that religion and science can be made compatible. I'm very glad that there's a counter up there. I wish you could keep your eye on it as well. Every single second, a star, like our own, the equivalent of our own, blows up and goes out. That happens every second, okay? If I keep to time, see if you can imagine this. Our brains aren't really constructed to imagine it very well. If I keep to my time, 540 great stars and suns will have vanished from the cosmos. It's a sobering thought. We're fortunate in being around to observe the continuing effects of the Big Bang and the mass destruction that it's unleashed. Future generations, if there are enough of them, won't be able to observe it so well. Why is that? Because as the Hubble telescope has shown us, the man for whom the telescope was named, Edwin Hubble, was slightly wrong. He knew the Big Bang was still going on. He knew the universe was still expanding. But he thought the universe rate of expansion would start to slow. What's been discovered by studying the red light shift is to the contrary. It's blowing apart much faster than we thought, and with huge, massive swathes of actual current and potential and future destruction. Soon, two galaxies, you can already see it in the night sky. You can see the future in the sky already, not as a vision, not as a revelation, not as an omen or a portent. You can see the Andromeda galaxy coming towards you. The collision between our galaxy and Andromeda is a certainty. It's inscribed in all the laws of physics. We know it's coming. It'll destroy some stars, but it'll probably succeed in making an amalgamation. May even become the only remaining galaxy. See if you think that religion is any help to you in considering that very real and important fact. A little while before this momentous event, I'm sorry to have to report, our own star will be disqualified from taking part in the grand merger because it, along with the 540 suns that will be lost to us in the course of my remarks, will blow up and swell up and burn out, and joining its 540 predecessors. And in more proximate news, what I might call more local, more suburban news, the luminosity of our sun is increasing at a very alarming rate, and in an easily foreseeable future, the temperature of our little planet will become that of Venus. In other words, it will be completely uninhabitable. And that'll be a small, but obviously to us very interesting development, and it will complete a grand slam. So far, all the other planets in our tiny suburb of a solar system are not conditioned to support life. They're either much too cold or much too hot, as large areas of our Earth are already much too hot and much too cold. Soon we'll join the too hot club, and that'll be a complete shutdown. And some people tell you that our universe and our cosmos was fine-tuned for existence, just so we could be here. Now, on truth claims, nothing I've said could be overthrown by any evidence. All we'll find out is more about it. We don't say on non-truth claims or faith claims that we know when we don't. I'm sorry, Dinesh, atheists do not say we know there is no God. We say, to the contrary, no argument and no evidence has ever been adduced that we consider to be persuasive. There's no reason to believe in evidence or argument, ontology or science. The same with the afterlife. Of course we don't say that we know there isn't one. We say that we don't know anyone who can bring any reason to think that there is. This is a very important distinction, and it's very regrettable that you miss it. And I'm sorry to say, Dinesh, that the immediate loser in an argument about things of which we can and can't be certain, where the only thing that is certain in these laws is the principle of uncertainty, the immediate loser, the man who has to leave the island, sorry, Dinesh, again, right away almost, is the one who says, I already know all I need to know. I already have all the information I need. Indeed, I've been given it by a supernatural body. I don't know about you, ladies and gentlemen, but when I hear people on the bus saying that they're talking to God, well, what do? Do you move closer to that person, or am I right in thinking you edge slightly away? I think that's a very good thing. I won't be able to complete everything I wanted to say. I've saved a bit for the next 4 minutes. The argument that some finally adduce against the laws of physics and the heat death of our universe is, well, don't spread the news because it would lead people to despair. I don't want anyone to despair. We have a number of consolations. We have our own solidarity, we have love, we have literature, we have our duties to each other. What leads to despair is to live the only life one has, being told what to do by despots and crackpots and pseudoscientists who claim the right to order us around in the name of God. Humanity has to outgrow and transcend that oldest of all the tyrannies. Thank you very much.
Religion loses because it cannot correct itself without pretending it meant the new discovery all along. Science can be wrong, update, and still win because it has a self-correcting method. Hubble and Gaia data even revised the old Andromeda collision prediction to about a 50-50 chance within 10 billion years. NASA says the sun will enter its red giant phase around 6 billion years from now. Human chromosome 2 also carries evidence of an ancient fusion shared with apes. These facts were not found in sermons. They were found by testing reality. Christianity adds no knowledge. It claims credit after evidence destroys its certainty.
I want to say, first of all, I think I'm not quite as unfriendly as Andres made me sound. But it's true that when he emailed me and said, so which side do you want to be on? Do you want to be with Christopher Hitchens and Sam Harris, or do you want to be with Rabbi Boteach and Dinesh D'Souza? I said, I think I disagree with all of those people. So I'm going to tell you what I meant by that, and then if you can decide whether I belong on one side or the other, or whether I just have to go back and sit in my chair and be lonely. As for why I don't think I believe on the side of I don't belong on that side, Christianity and Judaism are both religions of revelation. They believe that God revealed himself to Abraham and Moses, and then Christians believe he revealed himself in the form of Jesus Christ. I don't believe that that's true. And more broadly, the way I think of the universe is as a giant machine, as a materialist system that runs in accordance with the laws of science. And I don't see anything around me that can't, in principle, be explained by the laws of science. So I don't assume the existence of a God that intervenes in history. As to why I don't think I'd feel comfortable on that side of the aisle, well, first of all, a number of atheists seem to me, notwithstanding what Christopher said, to speak as if they're sure that there is no God of any kind. And I think anyone who speaks that way is kind of failing to display the intellectual humility that all of us should display, given the fact that our brains were designed by natural selection to do very mundane things like find food and find mates, and not to understand the ultimate nature of reality, okay? So I just kind of think I don't know what lies beyond. My mind isn't designed to understand certain things. But, and I must say, I disagree with the so-called new atheists, a label that's been applied to all three of these people, I think, because they argue that they are said to argue that religion is bad and should be expunged from the earth. I think religion is not intrinsically bad. On balance, has been good. I have no desire to talk them out of their faith. But the biggest reason probably that most atheists would reject me and would kick me off of their team is that when I look at the kind of life on earth, the system of life on earth, I see some evidence of a larger purpose unfolding, okay? That is to say, when I see, the evolution through natural selection from one-celled life to intelligent life, and then I see how that intelligent life launched a second process of evolution, cultural evolution, including technological evolution, and how that has carried the social organization of that species to higher and higher levels, and now the global level. I think there is, in various ways, evidence of some purpose unfolding. Now, as I said, I view the system of life as a machine, but machines can have purpose. Airplanes are machines, their purpose is to fly. This does raise the question of what I think ingrained this purpose in life. And as I said, I don't believe in a God that intervenes. It could conceivably be a kind of God that at the beginning of time launched the universe, and the laws of the universe were such that life was likely to arise, and so on. So in other words, the purpose was written into the laws of the universe. That's a kind of what's called a deistic God. But I should also say that I think it's possible for something to have purpose that was not ingrained by a conscious being, okay? So, and a number of philosophers agree on this point. So, for example, they might say that animals have a kind of purpose. They have goals, but it was ingrained by natural selection, which is not a conscious being. So I don't know where, if I'm right that there is purpose here, I don't know what ingrained it or whether there's a God. Now you might ask, well, does this purpose deserve the name divine, leaving aside the question of whether there's a God? And I would say, maybe, and the reason is this, that I see a moral direction in this, a moral dimension to this purpose. As I said in my talk on Friday, I think that technological evolution has brought people, ever since the Stone Age, in contact with more and more people at greater and greater distances, has made them interdependent with more and more people, and that gives them reason to work with those people, to acknowledge the humanity of those people, okay, which I think is moral progress. And now we're at a kind of climax of that process where the world is on the verge of a global civilization. But I think we will only succeed in trying to build an orderly global civilization if people everywhere get better at acknowledging the humanity of people who live far away and at putting themselves in the shoes of people who are in very different circumstances, even in the shoes of their rivals and their enemies. In other words, I think we have to exercise our moral imaginations, people everywhere, if we're going to keep things on a peaceful and orderly path, okay? So you might say, I mean, to put it in mildly biblical terms, you might say that I think the salvation of the world in the kind of Hebrew Bible sense, the Old Testament sense of salvation, the preservation of a healthy society, depends on moral progress, on continued moral progress. And I think maybe you could call that, if that reflects a purpose, as I think it may well, you could call that divine if you want to. In any event, I'd say that this worldview of mine, even though I don't associate with this purpose necessarily with a God, it helps me orient my moral life, even my spiritual life. And so it does for me some of the things that religion does for people. William James, the American psychologist and philosopher, said that religious belief is the belief that there is an unseen order and that your supreme interest lies in harmoniously adjusting yourself to that order. Well, in that sense, maybe I'm religious, and maybe I belong on that side of the aisle. I don't know, although I have to say the book of mine that Andres mentioned, The Evolution of God, was reviewed recently by Dinesh in Christianity Today, and Dinesh, if I'm on your team, you've got a funny way of showing it, I've got to say. At the same time, it's been denounced by atheists at least as vehemently, so including some who are here. In fact, my friend Dan Dennett, I recently wrote an essay in the New York Times arguing that at least a certain kind of religion is compatible with science, and Dan wrote a letter very critical of that to the New York Times, which unfortunately the New York Times did publish. So in any event, I'm afraid, I don't have a team to be on. When Andres asked for the show of hands, who was with them and who was with them, I think the total was more than 100% of the audience. So that doesn't leave any room for me. So I guess I'll go sit in my chair and be lonely. But thank you for listening.
Meaning does not need a supernatural author. Biology already explains cooperation through kinship, reciprocity, reputation, and group survival. People can build morality from shared harm, fairness, and human need. Christianity claims moral authority, then forces modern believers to defend ancient cruelty. Deuteronomy 13 says, even a family member who promotes another god should be killed. That is not moral progress. That is tribal control dressed up as holiness. Science explains behavior. Religion excuses obedience.
Many of you are probably wondering, what am I doing here today? No? Supposed to be here yesterday talking about the four experts about how economists are charlatans, how social science is composed of charlatanism dressed up in nice equations and stuff like that. Well, I got a problem. The very same people who trust the stock market distrust the priest. Okay? Stock market is something. In other words, you remember my turkey problem? How not to be a turkey? To me, the perfect turkey is the person who trusts what they learn at school in social science, economics. Those who think that with science and equation we can track a lot of reality. We can't. I've tried. And those who think that it's good to invest your 401k in the stock market, at the same time doubting religion. We've been doing religion for a very long time. I have a problem with this discussion on many grounds. The first one is because religion is not about belief. I'll tell you later why science also is not about belief. But let me show you first. Everything in life is about decisions. But religion itself is not about belief. Yesterday, I was having drinks with Ricardo Salinas, and he got the point right away. I told them the credo, okay? What did credo means originally? Doesn't mean what we mean by belief in the scientific sense today. You realize that credit comes from credo. It means I trust. The credo, the initial credo, is about trust. Amen in Hebrew, and it's confirmed by the rabbi, is I trust you. Okay? Same thing in Arabic, same thing in Greek, same thing even in English. Belief comes from, is linked to beloved. Let me think about uncertainty again. We have had this scientific arrogance coming from the Enlightenment that is starting to blow up the world with us learning to make decisions based on information. Before the scientific Enlightenment, we were much wiser. What did we do? We knew how to take decisions based on incomplete information, incomplete understanding, and incomplete knowledge, what I call opacity. And that's what religions did. Then Ariely confirmed that if you believe in evolution, and you see that in all societies, evolution creates religion that evolve without breaking for such a long time, it means they got a purpose. Now we live in a world of human arrogance, epistemic arrogance, I call it. We humans cannot be trusted with knowledge. We automatically turn arrogant about knowledge. I said yesterday how if you give someone information, even if it's sterile information, and most information you get from the papers is sterile, okay? You will increase in overconfidence. You will witness a much higher increase in confidence than warranted by the information. We humans don't know how to say, I don't know. And there's one word in almost all religions in which people learn to say, I don't know. And you know what that word is? God knows. So this is how you deal with incomplete information, and we've done it for a very long time. Let me now talk about science. Why in decisions in life we don't care about science. We don't care about I'm glad Dan Dennett is here, about epistemology. Epistemology is about what is true and false. I learned that as a trader because I make bets on unlikely events. So if they tell me, do you think the market is going to go down? I say, no. The statement the market will go down tomorrow is not true. But yet I'm betting. Why? There's a small probability, huge payoff. We make decisions based on payoff. When I see water on a floor, do I drink it? No. But if someone told me, do you think this water, do you have evidence that this water is poisonous? I say, no. I have no evidence it's poisonous, but I don't drink it. Life is about decision based on a code of probabilities. And religion helped us with that. Finally, there's one thing about negative advice. When you go to a bookstore, Barnes & Noble in the States, you have nothing but books telling you how to get rich in 10 steps, what to do, what to do, what to do. You cannot give someone negative advice. These are charlatans selling you stuff for $14, okay? If they know how to get rich, they wouldn't be there. Someone who tells you he knows how to do something typically is a fraud, typically, statistically. Those who tell you what not to do, don't get into debt, don't go into, typically, these examples don't have what I call survivorship biases, so these are better. Negative advice, unfortunately, cannot be conveyed as advice. It can be conveyed, as I heard the word dogma, as dogma, not as what we call kerygma, which is the opposite of dogma, something you can explain, talk someone into. You just said a dogma. You shall not borrow. Okay? You will not sell derivatives. You will not, period. You don't have to justify it. So this is what religion does. Thank you for listening for my first part.
Old does not mean true. Bloodletting lasted for thousands of years before evidence finally exposed it as bad medicine. That is what tradition can do. Protect weak ideas until facts destroy them. Religion has the same problem. Numbers 5 gives a priest's bitter water test for a suspected wife, and Leviticus 25 allows people to be owned as inherited property. Dogma can sound safe, but it can also chain people to cruelty. Survival proves power. Evidence proves truth. So here's the question. If a belief is ancient, useful, and comforting, but fails the evidence test, should we still call it truth? Comment below. Like and subscribe. This was only part 1 of the debate. If you want us to continue, comment more atheist, and we'll break down the next part.